Okay, we're at the stage where we're ready to hand sew down the back of a quilt binding. The first thing I like to do is to trim off all the excess threads and dog ears and things that are just gonna sort of get in my way and be annoying while I'm trying to hand stitch my binding. So any extra threads from the fabric, any threads from where you stopped and started on your corners, anything like that that's just gonna be in the way. You don't want that extra bulk when you are hand stitching this binding. So let's see, let's spin around to this side where it's nice and clean. And I want to show you, obviously if you're doing this for real, you're not going to use a dark blue thread on a light yellow backing. So I have a dark blue thread loaded. I also have a matching light yellow thread loaded. And in terms of needles, I use what I have. I like longer needles with bigger eyes because I'm not as young as I used to be. And I don't really think that the needle matters so much. It's more the quality of the stitch that you're going to put in that's going to make the difference. So I do use a thimble. This is one of these soft ones that I can link in the description of this video. I'm going to start with the blue thread, and I have a knot in it that I added. It's hard to focus on. Doesn't know where to look. So there's a knot right here in the back. And the first thing I'm going to do is pop this knot into the middle of this quilt sandwich. So I'm going to put the needle in, come back up right near that stitching line. When the thread comes up to it, my knot is now right here. And I'm going to just gently pull on this thread until that knot pops to the inside. So now the knot is inside the quilt sandwich, about right there. So that is a great way to start your thread so that you never see the tail ends. Now at this point, you're going to roll your binding from the front to the back. And again, this is a great place for wonder clips if you don't want to pinch and hold. And you're just going to take a little bite out of your backing fabric, come right up through the edge of your binding, pull taut, go back down into your binding fabric. The traveling of the stitch happens inside the quilt sandwich. And the part that comes up is going to come up right at the edge of the binding fabric on the fold. And then you're going to drop back in, do your traveling in your quilt sandwich, and pop back up right through the edge of that fold. So because I'm doing this in dark blue, you are obviously able to see these stitches, even though they are very small. If I was to do this with yellow, which I will do in just a minute, hopefully it is not as obvious. And so if you have two different colors, like I do here with the yellow backing and the green binding, you can kind of play around with which color works best for you. In this case, I did choose a light yellow, but you could also choose a light green. Or if you like your binding to stand out, you can choose a color like what I'm doing here, where, you know, this is something that is going to be seen. I tend to put my binding stitches about a ½ inch away from each other because I do want this to be sturdy and strong. And I have seen bindings that are much further apart, and it's just a little bit of a sloppier finish and not something that I would want to see if I was judging a quilt show. I'd want to see something where it was obvious that people took some time with it. One thing I also want to mention is when you stick this needle in here and you're traveling through your quilt sandwich, you do not want to come up through the other side. You do not want any of your binding stitches to show on the front. So you want to make sure that this needle sort of stays inside the quilt sandwich and doesn't pop through the front. And you can also kind of see how I'm doing here where I'm kind of poking so I can see where it's going to come up. You can do that so that you have better control over how big this binding stitch is going to finish. So I'm going to leave that one, and I'm going to pick up my yellow one just to show you how well this is going to hide on this quilt back. And again, I have a knot that I've added in here, just a little double knot just to hold the thread. So I'll show you the popping of the knot again so you can get reminded of that. I start way out here and I come up right near that stitching line. And when I get to where the knot is sitting, I just pop it in. And now that knot is hiding in the middle of the quilt. Actually, it might have come through. It did come through. So I'm going to tie one more little knot in this to make it a little bigger so that it hangs on when I do the popping. So let's see. We've got that I don't know if that's going to do it. Maybe it will. So let's try that one more time. We're going to start from out here, bring it in there. Let's see if we can get that. Yep. Okay, so now you see this is a little bit taut. If I just give it a little pull, now that knot is hidden inside. And again, I'm just going to fold the binding and start right there, and then travel inside the quilt sandwich, pop back up, travel inside the quilt sandwich. If it helps you to think about like a dolphin or some sea creature that swims under and then pops up for air, that might help remind you of where the thread should be going during a good binding stitch. And I'm going to try to do this quickly so we can make it over to the corner so I can show you how to address the corner when you get there, because it feels like there's more fabric than you need. So we are almost there. That'll be maybe 10 more stitches worth. So you can just watch and learn. And I do use my fingernails quite a bit. And if you don't have long fingernails, that's still fine. But I use my fingernails to sort of help guide where the fabric is. And I also use this finger is on the back. And basically that is making sure that I don't feel the needle coming through. It's sort of like my little front insurance policy, because if I was to poke all the way through, I'm going to feel it when it hits. But if I have my needle staying inside my quilt sandwich, then this finger will never feel that needle coming through. So just another little thing I've gathered over lots and lots of years of quilting and binding. So let's just keep going down to the end. And if you'll kind of look closely at this, you'll see that the new color I picked up hides much better than the blue. So you do want to pay attention to the thread that you choose. And this is just a single strand of aurifil thread. I do not use a double strand when sewing down binding because it's really unnecessary. And again, you want your stitches to hide. And so doubling up your thread width is not going to help that situation. So we are coming to a corner. This is going to be a lot different than the way we do corners if we're doing double machine binding. So let's see, we're getting closer. I've got maybe 4 more stitches to go. And the other thing, of course, you're going to do if you're binding is make sure that your machine stitching line from applying the front of the binding to the front of the quilt is hidden by the binding on the back. Okay, so here we are. We're close to the edge. We've got all these extra strings, so let's get all those extra threads out of there. We're close to the edge, and now we're going to have to figure out a way to make that corner. So this reminds me of folding wrapping paper on presents. You're going to basically fold out until you can kind of get a nice press here. So from this side, you're going to kind of pull and push and mush around with your hands until you get a nice crease right here. And then you can fold that in, and you want these two, this edge here and this edge here, to match up where they fold. So I've got a crease here, and I've got extra threads everywhere, it feels like. And I'm going to fold that in so that these two pieces meet up. And you'll see that right there. See how the two edges meet up? I do have a little red thread in there somewhere. There we go. Let's get that out of there. So fold and fold. So you have a nice 45-degree angle on your miter fold. And you can stick a pin there, or you can stick a wonder clip there. I think I'm going to go with a pin because the wonder clip's a little hard to sew around. So let me grab a pin. I'm going to pin so that I know that this is going to finish exactly where I need it to. So you see how nice that corner is going to look when I get it all sewn? I'm going to just start back with my, well, somehow my thread doubled. There we go. I'm going to start back with my hand stitching, keeping that pin in place. Put one here. And then my next hand stitch is going to come up through this piece and this piece. So it's going to basically secure that corner fold. So I'm going to come up through both pieces. And you may have to do a little wibbling and wobbling to make that happen. but you only get 4 corners, so you can take an extra moment on that. When you pull your pen out, the whole thing's going to try to fall apart again. But if you pull that thread taut, and this might be a good place for a wonder clip to hold it all. Let's see, let's flip that around so that it doesn't want to come apart. When I pull that thread tight, I've got a great quarter inch binding with that nice miter. So then I'm going to dive back in, and sometimes I actually go a little behind that stitch back into the backing of the quilt just to make sure that it's really going to hold tight. And see how that pulls together so nicely. We're trying to focus on the scissors. Let's focus over here. And then you just keep going. And when you get all the way around, I usually overrun by 1 or 2 stitches just to make sure everything is solid in there. And then I'll show you how to do the final stitch where you can hide or bury that knot in. So after just a couple more here, I will show you how I do my final stitch. And we'll just pretend that we're at the end because no one wants to watch someone bind an entire quilt. So let's just pretend. I'm going to throw a couple of wonder clips over here so we can pretend that the rest of this is already sewn down and we've made it all the way around. And I've overrun my first hand stitches with a couple more hand stitches, and now it's time to find a way to end this piece of thread. So what I'm going to do is make a couple of knots, and then I'm going to bury that knot, and then we can cut the thread tail. So one of the ways that I have found that works really well for doing a couple of knots, and hopefully that you'll be able to see this, is I make a knot, and then because this knot is just sort of in outer space, I have found that if you put your needle inside the knot circle and then have that knot create itself on the needle, you can kind of guide where the knot finishes, because otherwise that knot might finish anywhere along this length of thread. I mean, it may finish up here, it may finish down there, but if you put your needle inside that kind of lasso circle, let's see, I'll show you. See how this circle is trying to close on itself way up high, and I don't want it to close way up here. I want it to close way down there near where I want to be finished. So if I just kind of pull the tail, that knot is going to follow and finish right down at the bottom right here. So at this point I can dive back into my quilt sandwich, put a nice long stitch in there, make sure we're not coming through on the front. And then when I pull my thread through, this knot that I've made is going to pop right into the middle. Sometimes you can even hear it. It makes a little pop noise. And then you're all done. So all I have to do then is cut this thread, and you never would know where it stopped or started because that knot is buried and this is the last stitch, and because I made my knot right near the last stitch, it's very invisible. So there you go. That is how to hand bind the back of a quilt. Hope you've enjoyed it.